English for teaching purposes. Concluding.
This video is about concluding arguments and the ways to phrase them. Remember the argumental roller coaster loops we talked about previously? Well, whenever you open one, you have to introduce it, and whenever you're done with it, you need to close it. The way to do it is to tie a tight knot that secures it before moving towards the next point. Conclusions are such knots. In the next few minutes, we will work with a typology of conclusions. From it, you will be able to draw the language required to give closure to your ideas in class. But before we do that, perhaps it would be a good idea to define what conclusions are. Conclusions are statements that give closure to a topic being developed in class. They usually include language that makes such closure explicit, and they should prove the contention being presented. Conclusions render contents meaningful. Basically, they are not something we could happily skip, so let's take some time to learn how to build and phrase them. But how many types of conclusions are there? Some people will argue that you can have up to even 10 types of conclusions. We'll try and conflate them into only 5. The classification that you're about to see is based on the meaning and function of each conclusion type. Their name explains what they are without any doubt. Summary conclusions recap the most important ideas covered within an argument loop. While we should run away from run-of-the-mill expressions like in summary or its equivalent, to sum up, in writing, they tend to be quite useful in oral discourse. They serve as signposts to announce that what is coming is both a closing statement and a summary. There are other wordier and richer circumlocutions that will send the same message to our audience like, let's briefly summarize the main points. In a few words, what we have discussed is, or we'll now briefly refer to the essential points. When you'd rather save words and go straight to the point, use expressions like in brief, in short, or in a nutshell. When you summarize, notice you will tend to use the present perfect or the present perfect continuous for even more emphasis to refer to what's just been said. The rest of the summary will flow nicely in the present or the past simple. You will now watch Laurar Now, a lecturer associated to the School of Education at Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona, presenting a summary conclusion.
So just to summarize really a little bit, let's say we can give feedback, get back to participants and in every stage of our research process, let's say, especially at the beginning because we need to plan it, but in the middle as well, as you said before, yeah, just to give some feedback from them about the transcripts and so on, and at the end we will put on all these strategies that you highlight, which are very good strategies. For example, to organize a meeting or to send them the report, to take special care of them, or especially I'm also thinking that we can extend these meetings to our politicians as well. Not also participants, but politicians and society in general.
Relevant statements are very efficient concluding devices, especially after discussing issues that the students find it difficult to make sense of. Rhetorical questions are great to introduce relevant conclusions. You can choose between the more elaborate and complex versions to the simplest and most direct, as you will see next. But why have we been talking in depth about? What's the purpose of this discussion? Why are we talking about this? Relevant statements benefit from emphatic structures. All in all, what they intend to do is highlight the reasons that justify our spending class time dealing with a particular issue. There are words that help enhance the relevance encoded in this kind of conclusions. You really don't need to think too hard. Just take a look at the following expressions: capital, critical, crucial, decisive, essential, meaningful, vital. Formulate your relevant statements in the present simple. It is the tense that will reflect how universal and important the points are. If you use verb to be, make sure to use words heavy in meaning. Intensify, insist, accentuate. Recommendations, mild or strong, challenging or urgent, are great ways to give a clincher to your point. They are clearly useful after describing processes, but if you think of them as appeals, they can also be handy to get students to reflect, take a stance, or defend a viewpoint. They implicitly require the listeners to take action, but their wording is that of a mere suggestion. Calls for action use expressions that will urge students to stand up and do something. Some are challenges and some are closer to instructions in meaning and intention. You should now think of the implications of the point we just made as: I suggest to consider the ideas presented so far as: it is imperative that we start thinking of, prepare to. Recommendation conclusions are reliant on verbs. The more pressing the conclusion, the more urgent the verb. Let's look at a list of examples. Advise, challenge, encourage, invite, recommend, suggest, urge. We will now watch Xavier Fontic, who will present a summary conclusion in which he evaluates an approach to reading comprehension.
The conclusion is that we should take a psycholinguistic perspective. What is in the text depends on what is in my head, on my previous ideas, on my culture, let's say, on my previous knowledge about the text. So how can I measure reading comprehension? By taking into account both things, the text and previous ideas of the reader, both things,
Solution. The natural way to conclude a problem-based argument is by offering its solution. When our conclusion is the solution to a problem, we'll make use of classic connectors such as in conclusion, to conclude, as a result, so, therefore. There are verbs like add up, confirm, corroborate, demonstrate, prove, result in, show, and verify that are frequently used to express solutions once the problem has been thoroughly examined. Solutions are usually expressed in the present simple since we take it as a fact that our proposition will prove effective whenever the problem discussed arises. Anecdotes, stories, and tales. Stories are usually told in the past. and can require the use of a few verb tenses to develop the narrative thread and the references to a past event that may have occurred before the main. Sometimes the actions we refer to take time to be completed or are interrupted by another. Using the adequate tense is important to accurately deliver the message your students are meant to receive. Personal narrative is easy to introduce. We usually use locutions like, "This reminds me of a time when..." "I've just remembered that once..." Quotes. Using somebody else's words in class requires good memory, good notes, maybe a combination of the two, and especially the choice of a person that your students know well. Quoting language is very simple. Use the past simple and stick to common reporting verbs. The best verbs to use are the following: say, state, claim, suggest, affirm, and argue. Don't forget to use the exact same words as the author. Keep your conclusions simple. Remember, if your conclusions need a lot of elaboration or the addition of more information, your argument is not done yet. Make meaningful pauses. Your clinchers should be followed by a meaningful pause. This pause will allow you to organize your thoughts and prepare your students for the new information coming. Remember that you can use resources other than your own statements to make conclusions. Consider using recordings by experts, sounds, images, videos to close your arguments. We'll leave you now with these last thoughts. See you next time.